Most people think they are tired because they work too hard. They believe exhaustion is the price of ambition, that burnout is proof they are pushing themselves to the limit. But this belief is wrong, and it is the reason so many people stay trapped in a cycle of effort without progress. Long before productivity books, before modern psychology, Japanese warriors understood a deeper truth: exhaustion is rarely physical. It is psychological misalignment. A samurai could train for hours, fight duels to the death, travel on foot across harsh terrain, and still remain mentally clear and internally calm. Meanwhile, today, people feel drained after sitting in a chair all day. The difference is not strength. It is direction. Imagine a young warrior arriving at a dojo for the first time. His body is strong, his motivation high, his desire to succeed burning hot. For weeks he trains harder than everyone else. He sleeps less, pushes more, refuses rest. Yet something strange happens. Instead of becoming sharper, he feels heavier. His movements lose precision. His mind becomes noisy. He wakes up tired, trains tired, and goes to sleep already exhausted. Nothing is technically wrong, yet everything feels off. This is the moment where most people quit, blaming themselves for not being disciplined enough. But the samurai masters never blamed effort. They examined alignment. The human mind leaks energy in ways most people never notice. Every time you act while seeking approval, energy leaks. Every time you compare yourself to others, energy leaks. Every time you perform instead of practice, energy leaks. Modern life is built on constant comparison and external validation, which means most people are exhausted before the day even begins. The samurai avoided this trap not through isolation, but through clarity. They trained for one reason only: to walk their own path with precision. Nothing else mattered. Miyamoto Musashi, the most famous swordsman in Japanese history, fought over 60 life-or-death duels and never once burned out. He trained daily, traveled constantly, created art, wrote philosophy, and meditated deeply. From the outside, this seems impossible. But Musashi did not live scattered. He removed everything that did not serve his path. He did not train to impress. He did not fight to prove himself. He did not create art for praise. Each action flowed from the same internal direction. Because of this, his energy multiplied instead of drained. Most people today live the opposite way. They wake up already reacting. Notifications, expectations, obligations, and comparisons pull them in 10 directions at once. Their body is doing one thing while their mind is somewhere else entirely. This internal split is the true cause of fatigue. When attention is divided, energy collapses. When purpose is unclear, effort becomes heavy. The samurai understood that a straight path conserves strength, while circular movement destroys it. There is a dangerous illusion in modern culture, the belief that rest alone will fix exhaustion. Rest helps the body, but it does nothing for a misaligned life. You can sleep 8 hours and still wake up tired if your actions contradict your inner direction. Samurai training focused first on removing inner resistance, not increasing intensity. They asked a brutal question before every action: is this necessary for my path? If the answer was no, it was discarded without emotion. This is why their discipline looked effortless. Not because it was easy, but because it was clean. No wasted motion. No unnecessary thought. No performance for an invisible audience. The moment you stop trying to be seen, energy returns. The moment you stop running in circles, momentum appears. The samurai did not chase motivation. They built a structure that made quitting impossible. This is where the real lesson begins. If you feel constantly tired, it is not because you lack strength. It is because you are carrying weight that serves no purpose. And until that weight is removed, no amount of effort will ever be enough. Once a warrior understood that exhaustion came from misalignment, the next question became unavoidable: how do you remove the weight without losing ambition? Most people fear that letting go of pressure will make them weak, lazy, or irrelevant. The samurai discovered the opposite. They realized that ambition without direction creates chaos, while ambition aligned to a single path creates force. Power is not intensity. Power is focus sustained over time. In traditional training, the master did not immediately increase difficulty. Instead, he reduced noise. A student would be asked to simplify everything: fewer possessions, fewer techniques, fewer words, fewer goals. At first, this felt uncomfortable. The mind panicked. What if I need this later? What if I fall behind? What if others get ahead? These thoughts were not signs of intelligence. They were signs of attachment. Every attachment created friction. Every friction drained energy. A young student might arrive with 10 reasons for training: recognition, status, fear of failure, competition, approval, escape, ambition, anger, insecurity, and pride. The master would strip these away one by one. Not through lectures, but through experience. The student would be sent to practice alone. No audience. No praise. No comparison. Just repetition. In silence, the truth surfaced quickly. Without external validation, most people feel empty. That emptiness is what modern life avoids at all costs. The samurai did not avoid it. They entered it deliberately. In that emptiness, they found clarity. When no one is watching, only what truly matters remains. Actions done for the wrong reasons feel heavy. Actions done for the right reason feel light, even when physically demanding. This is how warriors learn the difference between effort that drains and effort that strengthens. Musashi wrote that unnecessary movement is the enemy of victory. This applied not only to combat, but to life itself. Every extra goal dilutes energy. Every side path weakens momentum. Modern people believe multitasking is a strength, but the samurai saw it as a fatal flaw. A divided mind is a tired mind. A focused mind becomes sharp, calm, and dangerous. One of the most radical practices in samurai discipline was removing choice. Choice feels like freedom, but it is actually exhausting. Every decision costs energy. When training time, training method, and training purpose are fixed, the mind stops resisting. There is nothing to debate. Action begins automatically. This is why monks and warriors followed strict routines. Not to control themselves, but to free themselves from constant internal negotiation. Most people fail not because they lack discipline, but because they give their mind too many escape routes. I'll start tomorrow. I'll adjust later. I'll see how I feel. These phrases sound harmless, but they poison consistency. Samurai training eliminated escape routes entirely. Once a commitment was made, it was no longer questioned. Identity replaced motivation. A warrior did not ask if he felt like training. He trained because that was who he was. Over time, something unexpected happened. As resistance disappeared, energy returned. The same training that once felt draining became stabilizing. The body moved without tension. The mind stayed quiet. The student no longer needed encouragement. The practice carried him forward on its own. This was the beginning of true discipline. Modern culture glorifies extremes, bursts of effort followed by collapse. The samurai rejected this cycle. They valued rhythm over intensity. A steady flame burns longer than a wildfire. Rhythm conserves energy. Consistency compounds power. This is why their progress looked slow at first, but unstoppable over time. When you remove unnecessary weight, simplify direction, and eliminate choice, discipline stops feeling like force. It becomes alignment. And alignment creates an energy that does not fade with time. This is the second lesson most people never learn: you do not need more drive. You need fewer distractions. Once alignment replaced struggle, the samurai confronted a deeper enemy: inconsistency disguised as freedom. To an untrained mind, variation feels intelligent. Changing methods, adjusting schedules, experimenting constantly, these behaviors appear adaptive. The warrior saw through the illusion. Variation before mastery creates weakness. Stability is not stagnation. It is the foundation of power. In ancient training halls, repetition was absolute. The same movement, the same stance, the same sequence, day after day. Beginners often protested internally. Surely there must be faster techniques. Surely variety would accelerate growth. The masters never argued. They simply let time reveal the truth. Every variation forced the mind to decide again. Every decision reopened resistance. Repetition, when fixed, removed thinking entirely. The human brain seeks efficiency. When actions repeat in the same context, neural pathways strengthen. Effort decreases. Precision increases. What once required focus becomes automatic. The samurai understood this long before neuroscience confirmed it. They built discipline by making the practice predictable enough that the body took over. Modern people mistake boredom for failure. The moment something feels dull, they assume it is no longer working. Samurai training rejected this belief completely. Boredom was not a signal to change. It was proof that the mind was losing control. Boredom meant the ego had nothing to cling to. That was exactly the point. A warrior was taught to stay when the mind wanted to leave. To repeat when the ego demanded novelty. To remain when the desire for stimulation appeared. This is where most people quit. Not because the work is too hard, but because the mind is no longer entertained. The samurai knew that entertainment creates dependency. Mastery requires endurance beyond stimulation. There was a saying among instructors, when the form disappears, the self disappears. At first, this sounded poetic and meaningless. Over time, it became painfully clear. The self thrives on choices, preferences, opinions, and control. Fixed form removes all of these. There is nothing to express, nothing to prove, nothing to adjust. Only execution remains. This is why the same routine done daily creates a strange psychological effect. At first, resistance rises. Then frustration. Then boredom. Then something breaks. The need to interfere collapses. The practice continues without emotional involvement. Action flows without commentary. The warrior is no longer trying. He is moving. Consistency at this level becomes frightening to outsiders. From the outside, it looks rigid. In reality, it is liberation. The mind no longer carries the burden of deciding who to be today. Identity has been set. Direction is fixed. Energy once wasted on internal debate is now available for refinement. The samurai also understood that inconsistency trains weakness. Every time you stop and restart, the brain learns that quitting is an option. Every gap reinforces fragility. The body adapts to interruption. Discipline becomes conditional. Warriors could not afford this. In battle, hesitation meant death. In life, it meant decay. Instead of heroic effort, they trained inevitability. The practice was not something that might happen if conditions were right. It happened regardless. Rain, illness, fatigue, distraction, none altered the sequence. The form remained. When obstacles arose, the form adapted minimally, but never disappeared. This is where modern discipline collapses. People demand perfect conditions before acting. The samurai acted within imperfect conditions and grew stronger because of them. Adaptation did not mean abandonment. It meant continuity. As repetition continued, the warrior noticed something profound. Emotional highs and lows lost power. Motivation became irrelevant. Fear diminished. Confidence stabilized. Progress no longer depended on mood. This is the point where discipline becomes identity. The practice no longer feels imposed. It feels natural. The third lesson is brutal and simple: variation feels productive, but repetition builds power. Freedom without structure drains energy. Structure without negotiation creates momentum. And momentum, once established, is nearly impossible to stop. This is how the samurai learned faster than others. Not by doing more, but by changing less. Once repetition stripped away choice, the next battle began: endurance without reward. Most people rely on visible progress to continue. They need feedback, praise, improvement, or excitement. The samurai trained in an environment where none of these were guaranteed. Progress was often invisible. Advancement was delayed. Recognition was rare. This was intentional. In traditional training, weeks could pass without correction or encouragement. The student would repeat the same form, the same movement, the same ritual, uncertain whether improvement was happening at all. This uncertainty crushed many. They mistook silence for failure. The samurai were taught to see it differently. Silence was space. Space allowed growth beneath awareness. The mind is addicted to reassurance. It wants confirmation that effort is paying off. When confirmation is absent, doubt appears. Doubt is not weakness, it is a test. The warrior learned to continue despite not knowing. This created a level of resilience modern systems rarely produce. Training without feedback forces trust in the process instead of trust in emotion. The samurai did not ask, "Am I improving?" They asked only, "Did I practice today?" Outcome was irrelevant. Execution was everything. Over time, this removed anxiety entirely. There was nothing to evaluate. Nothing to judge. Nothing to fear. This is where most people fail in modern life. They demand proof before commitment. They want guarantees before effort. The samurai reversed this order. Commitment came first. Proof came later, sometimes much later. This made their discipline unshakable. Another hidden advantage emerged. When progress is slow and invisible, the ego loses interest. There is nothing to brag about. No milestones to announce. No external validation. Only those who truly intend to continue remain. The unserious disappear quickly. This self-selection created elite consistency without competition. There is a psychological shift that occurs during prolonged effort without reward. At first, frustration grows. Then resentment. Then numbness. And then, unexpectedly, calm. The desire for outcome fades. The action becomes sufficient. The samurai recognized this state as the beginning of mastery. When effort is no longer tied to reward, it becomes stable. Motivation stops rising and falling. Practice becomes neutral. Neutrality is power. A neutral mind does not panic under pressure. It does not rush success. It does not collapse under delay. In battle, this was critical. A warrior who depended on emotional highs would fail when fear appeared. A warrior who depended on praise would hesitate when alone. Only those trained to act without reward could function under chaos. The training was never about the dojo. It was about life. This endurance without feedback also sharpened perception. When improvement is slow, subtle changes become visible. Breath steadies. Balance improves. Timing sharpens. These refinements are invisible to spectators but decisive in action. The samurai learned to value depth over display. Modern culture conditions people to expect instant results. Algorithms reward speed. Metrics demand growth. This creates fragile discipline. Remove the reward, and effort collapses. Samurai discipline thrived precisely because reward was delayed. The fourth principle is ruthless: continue even when nothing seems to happen. Especially then. The quiet phase is where transformation occurs. The body adapts before the mind recognizes it. Strength appears before confidence. Skill emerges before awareness. Those who quit early never experience this threshold. They assume stagnation means failure. The samurai understood that stagnation is often compression, the moment before expansion. Pressure builds silently. Then release occurs suddenly. This is why their learning appeared supernatural. Outsiders saw sudden leaps in ability and assumed talent. In reality, those leaps were delayed payments for unseen labor. The work had been happening all along. When you can endure without reward, without recognition, without visible progress, you become unstoppable. No external condition can remove your discipline. The practice survives isolation, criticism, and doubt. This is where warriors separated themselves from the ordinary. Not through intensity, but through patience. After endurance without reward was mastered, the samurai faced a more dangerous enemy, comfort disguised as wisdom. Comfort never announces itself honestly. It speaks in reasonable language. It pretends to be balance, self-care, or intelligence. The warriors were trained to recognize this voice and ignore it completely. In long training cycles, the body begins to adapt. Pain fades. Movements feel easier. Breathing stabilizes. This is where most people relax their standards. They shorten sessions. They skip repetitions. They tell themselves they have earned flexibility. The samurai did the opposite. When training became easier, they increased precision. Ease was not a signal to slow down. It was a signal to refine. The moment effort felt comfortable, the focus shifted to form. The angle of the wrist. The placement of the foot. The timing of the breath. Comfort exposed flaws that intensity had hidden. Only a calm body reveals subtle weakness. This prevented stagnation. Many people mistake repetition for growth. They repeat lazily, assuming time alone produces mastery. The samurai repeated consciously. Every motion was executed as if it were being observed, even when no one watched. Especially when no one watched. This created internal accountability. Without an audience, character appears. The samurai believed that training done alone revealed more than training done publicly. Public effort invites performance. Private effort reveals truth. They also understood that discipline without awareness becomes mechanical, and mechanical practice eventually decays. Precision was their defense. Precision forced presence. Presence prevented drift. Another principle was enforced during this phase: never negotiate standards downward. Once a form was defined, it was sacred. Lowering it, even slightly, was seen as betrayal of the self. The warriors were taught that compromise accumulates invisibly. One shortcut invites another. One exception becomes a habit. Decay begins quietly. Modern people believe flexibility prevents burnout. Samurai discipline proved the opposite. Clarity prevents burnout. When rules are firm, the mind relaxes. There is nothing to decide. Nothing to debate. The practice becomes simple again. This is why their routines looked rigid from the outside but felt freeing on the inside. Freedom came from certainty. Certainty eliminated friction. At this stage, the ego attempted a final escape. It whispered that mastery had already been achieved. That further effort was unnecessary. That it was time to move on. The samurai were warned about this phase. They called it the plateau of pride. Pride halts growth faster than fear. Fear at least keeps you alert. Pride blinds. The solution was brutal humility. The student was reminded daily that mastery is not an endpoint but a condition that must be maintained. Even advanced warriors practiced basics longer than beginners. Simple movements repeated endlessly. This was not regression. It was reinforcement. Foundations were never abandoned. Power rested on them. This humility created a paradox. The more skilled a warrior became, the simpler his practice looked. Spectators saw nothing impressive. Opponents experienced something devastating. The fifth principle is clear: comfort is not the enemy, but complacency is. Ease is not permission to relax standards. It is an invitation to sharpen them. When effort no longer hurts, precision becomes the battlefield. When discipline no longer feels heavy, character is tested. Most people stop when it becomes easy. Samurai began again. This is why their strength endured. Not because they were extreme, but because they were exact. After precision replaced comfort, the final internal enemy emerged: identity attachment. This is the most difficult battle because it feels personal. The samurai were trained to detach not only from outcomes, pain, and praise, but from the version of themselves they believed they were becoming. Most people cling to labels. Beginner. Intermediate. Advanced. Disciplined. Undisciplined. Strong. Weak. These identities create ceilings. Once a person believes they are something, they subconsciously protect that identity instead of exceeding it. The samurai rejected fixed self-images. A warrior was never good enough. He was never complete. He was always in motion. Identity was fluid, not fixed. This prevented stagnation at a psychological level deeper than skill. Training was designed to dissolve ego attachment. The same drills repeated endlessly ensured no moment felt special. No single performance defined the warrior. There was no peak to defend. No reputation to protect. Only continuation. This is why their discipline survived failure. Failure did not threaten who they were. Success did not inflate them. Both passed without altering commitment. Modern people collapse when identity is threatened. Miss one day and they say, "I guess I'm not disciplined." Fail once and they think, "This isn't for me." The samurai removed this vulnerability entirely. Missing was not identity collapse. It was adjustment. Continuation remained. This principle made quitting impossible. There was nothing to quit. The practice was not something they did. It was something that passed through them. Another hidden benefit emerged: emotional neutrality. When identity dissolves, emotional spikes flatten. Pride fades. Shame weakens. Anxiety loses leverage. The warrior becomes harder to manipulate, by others or by himself. This emotional neutrality is why samurai could remain calm in chaos. Battle was not personal. Training had removed the ego that reacts emotionally. Action replaced reaction. At this stage, discipline no longer felt like effort. It felt inevitable. Like gravity. Like time passing. The body moved before the mind interfered. This is where outsiders misunderstand. They think the warrior is highly motivated. Motivation is unstable. Motivation rises and falls. The samurai were not motivated. They were aligned. Alignment is quieter than motivation but infinitely stronger. Alignment means behavior matches structure. No emotion is required. The sixth principle is ruthless but liberating: stop trying to become someone. Let the practice erase who you were. When identity dissolves, resistance vanishes. There is nothing left to defend. Nothing to negotiate. Nothing to protect. This is why samurai discipline appears inhuman. It is not driven by desire. It is driven by continuity. Most people ask, "How do I stay consistent?" The samurai never asked this question. Consistency was no longer a goal. It was the default state. Once this stage is reached, relapse becomes rare. There is no dramatic collapse. No emotional spiral. If disruption occurs, continuation resumes naturally. This is the point of no return. Discipline stops being a struggle and becomes a law. And laws do not require motivation to be obeyed. Once discipline became a law rather than an effort, the samurai faced a challenge most never anticipate: isolation. True consistency separates you. Not violently, not loudly, but quietly. While others fluctuate, you remain. While others restart, you continue. Over time, this creates distance. The samurai were trained to expect this. Discipline alters social gravity. People are comfortable with ambition. They are comfortable with intention. They are uncomfortable with execution. When someone executes relentlessly, it forces comparison. Comparison creates discomfort. This is why consistent individuals are often misunderstood. They are called extreme, obsessive, rigid, or unbalanced. These labels are not observations. They are defenses. The samurai understood this dynamic centuries ago. Isolation was not treated as a problem to solve but as a signal of alignment. When fewer people can relate to your routine, it means you are no longer operating at the average level. Average behavior creates belonging. Exceptional consistency creates distance. This distance is dangerous if unprepared. Many quit not because discipline is hard, but because being different is uncomfortable. Humans are wired for belonging. The pull to conform is powerful. The samurai neutralized this by anchoring identity internally rather than socially. They did not seek validation from the crowd. Their validation came from the continuity of practice itself. Each completed day was sufficient proof. No applause required. Another social shift occurred. Some people didn't leave, they observed. Quietly. They watched consistency over time. Most never commented. But discipline has gravity. Eventually, it attracts those who are ready. The samurai didn't recruit. They demonstrated. This is why their influence spread slowly but permanently. No persuasion. No preaching. Only presence. At this stage, temptation changed form. It was no longer laziness. It was invitation. Invitations to relax. Invitations to take a break. Invitations framed as concern. You've earned it. You're doing too much. Just this once. These invitations were the final test. The samurai learned that discipline rarely collapses under pressure. It collapses under permission. Permission is more dangerous than resistance. Resistance sharpens discipline. Permission dulls it. The warrior responded not with argument but with silence. He did not justify his routine. He did not explain. Explanation invites negotiation. He simply continued. This created quiet authority. Authority without dominance. Confidence without noise. The kind that unsettles others without intention. The seventh principle is subtle: protect your discipline from interpretation. The moment you explain it, you weaken it. The moment you defend it, you invite interference. Silence preserves structure. By this point, discipline no longer needed reinforcement. It needed protection. Protection from comfort, from permission, from social erosion. The samurai learned to move through life unnoticed, practicing while others talked. While others debated, they trained. While others planned, they executed. This invisibility was power. It removed friction. No expectations. No pressure. No distractions. And slowly, something irreversible occurred. Discipline stopped being noticed by others, but its effects became undeniable. Results arrived quietly. Strength. Precision. Presence. Control. No announcement. No celebration. Just proof. This is when discipline fully separates the warrior from the crowd, not by declaration, but by consequence. And at this point, returning to the old way becomes impossible. Because once silence produces results, noise loses value. After isolation came mastery of time. This was the advantage outsiders never noticed. The samurai did not experience time the way ordinary people did. For most, time feels scarce, rushed, constantly slipping away. For the disciplined warrior, time became structured, predictable, and obedient. This shift happened because discipline removes decision fatigue. When actions are predetermined, the mind stops negotiating. There is no daily debate about whether to train, study, or refine. The body moves. The clock follows. The samurai understood a truth modern people ignore: time is not managed through urgency, but through ritual. Urgency creates spikes of effort followed by collapse. Ritual creates smooth, unstoppable momentum. Every practice occurred at the same time, in the same order, regardless of mood. This repetition trained the nervous system to enter focus automatically. No warm-up needed. No inspiration required. The mind learned when to be silent. As a result, minutes became denser. 1 hour of samurai training produced more progress than days of distracted effort. This is why they appeared to learn faster than others. They were not faster. They were uninterrupted. Most people lose time to mental friction, scrolling, doubting, restarting, regretting. The samurai eliminated friction by removing choice. Choice drains time more than action ever does. At this stage, boredom surfaced. Not dramatic boredom, but quiet monotony. The same drills. The same silence. The same routine. This was intentional. Boredom was a gate. The samurai believed boredom exposed commitment. Anyone can act when stimulated. Only the disciplined act when nothing feels new. They trained specifically to perform under monotony. This made them lethal in chaos. When others panicked, novelty overwhelmed them. The samurai had already mastered the absence of excitement. Another transformation occurred: patience. Not passive waiting, but active endurance. Progress no longer needed to be visible. Weeks could pass without noticeable improvement. This did not weaken discipline. It strengthened it. The warrior trusted accumulation. Tiny refinements layered daily. Imperceptible growth compounded silently. This trust prevented emotional fluctuation. There was no rush. No frustration. Only continuation. This is where most people fail. They demand feedback to continue. Likes. Results. Validation. The samurai moved without witnesses. Their discipline did not require recognition to survive. The eighth principle emerges here: treat time as an ally, not an enemy. When discipline is stable, time multiplies effort. When discipline is unstable, time exposes weakness. By mastering time, the samurai escaped urgency. Urgency creates mistakes. Calm creates precision. This calm is what gave them their legendary presence. They moved slower, but arrived first. They spoke less, but commanded attention. They waited longer, but struck decisively. At this level, discipline becomes invisible. There is no struggle to showcase. No motivation to display. Life simply aligns around practice. Time stops feeling heavy. Days stop feeling wasted. Every hour becomes useful. And once time begins working for you, instead of against you, progress becomes inevitable. This is when the warrior stops chasing mastery, and mastery begins approaching him. When time became an ally, the final transformation began: internal silence. This was the state the samurai valued above all others. Not emptiness, not numbness, but control. A mind that does not argue, rush, or hesitate. Most people are trapped in constant internal noise. Thoughts overlap. Emotions interrupt. Fear negotiates. Desire distracts. Action is delayed while the mind debates itself. The samurai recognized this as the true enemy. Training was designed to quiet this noise. Repetition, solitude, and ritual slowly starved unnecessary thoughts. The mind learned that it was not required to comment on every action. Silence became the default. This silence was not weakness. It was clarity. With fewer thoughts, perception sharpened. Small details became visible. Subtle errors were corrected instantly. Reaction time shortened because there was nothing to process. Action emerged cleanly. This is why samurai seemed to move before danger fully appeared. They were not predicting the future. They were simply unobstructed by thought. At this stage, fear changed shape. It did not disappear, but it lost control. Fear became information instead of a command. The body acknowledged risk without freezing or fleeing. Most people let fear decide. The samurai let fear inform. This distinction is critical. Fear is natural. Obedience to fear is optional. Another shift occurred: emotional resilience. Praise no longer inflated. Criticism no longer wounded. Silence absorbed both. This emotional neutrality made the warrior untouchable. Modern individuals are fragile because emotion drives behavior. The samurai reversed this equation. Behavior remains stable regardless of emotional weather. This is the ninth principle: mastery begins when the mind stops interfering with the body. Discipline had now rewired instinct. Movement occurred before doubt. Practice continued despite boredom. Continuation was automatic. At this point, discipline became invisible even to the warrior himself. There was no inner narrative of staying strong or pushing through. Those concepts vanished. There was only action. This is where outsiders misunderstand again. They assume discipline must feel intense. It does not. True discipline feels quiet. Almost boring. Almost effortless. Effort is a sign of misalignment. Alignment removes strain. Silence also created strategic advantage. Without emotional urgency, decisions improved. Timing sharpened. The warrior could wait longer than others, and strike with certainty. This patience terrified opponents. People expect reaction. They do not know how to handle stillness. The samurai weaponized stillness. Stillness before movement. Silence before action. Calm before chaos. This inner quiet also removed regret. Regret requires attachment to alternative outcomes. The samurai acted fully, then released. No replaying. No self-punishment. This allowed rapid recovery. Loss did not linger. Mistakes were corrected without emotion. Improvement accelerated. By now, the warrior had crossed a psychological threshold. Returning to a noisy mind was impossible. Once silence is felt, chaos becomes unbearable. This is why disciplined individuals struggle in undisciplined environments. Noise becomes painful. Disorder feels heavy. But this discomfort is power. It pulls the warrior back to structure automatically. By mastering silence, the samurai completed the internal transformation. Only one step remained. Not learning more. Not training harder. But choosing when to stop. Because true mastery includes restraint. And the most dangerous warrior is not the one who acts often, but the one who acts only when necessary. The final discipline of the samurai was not action, effort, or intensity. It was restraint. After silence was mastered, after time obeyed, after identity dissolved, the warrior learned the most dangerous skill of all, knowing when not to act. Most people believe power is visible. They believe strength must announce itself. The samurai understood the opposite. True power stays hidden until required. Restraint is misunderstood as weakness. In reality, it is delayed force. It is control over impulse. It is the ability to hold energy without leaking it through unnecessary motion, speech, or reaction. By this stage, the warrior no longer needed to prove anything, to himself or to others. His discipline had already rewritten his nervous system. He did not chase opportunities. He waited until alignment appeared. This patience separated the samurai from reckless fighters. While others rushed, the warrior observed. While others reacted, he measured. When action finally occurred, it was precise, final, and efficient. This is why their movements were minimal. No wasted steps. No emotional swings. No hesitation. Every action served a purpose. The 10th principle is simple but rare: discipline is not about doing more. It is about doing only what matters. Modern people exhaust themselves by constant motion. They confuse busyness with progress. The samurai rejected this entirely. Energy was conserved, not spent. This conservation created longevity. The warrior could endure years of pressure without burnout. While others flared brightly and faded, the samurai remained steady. Restraint also protected the mind. By refusing to react to every provocation, the warrior preserved inner silence. Conflict was chosen, not inherited. This made him unpredictable. People could not read him. Could not bait him. Could not rush him. Silence, patience, and restraint formed an invisible armor. At this point, discipline no longer felt like a rule. It felt like wisdom. It guided decisions without force. The samurai had reached the stage where discipline was no longer trained, it was embodied. This is where legends begin. Not because of loud victories, but because of consistent presence. Because of unshakable calm. Because of restraint that made action irreversible when it finally came. Most people will never reach this stage. Not because it is impossible, but because it requires letting go of urgency, ego, and noise. Those who do reach it become dangerous, not to others, but to mediocrity. They stop needing motivation. They stop seeking validation. They stop explaining themselves. Their lives become quiet proof. This is the forbidden technique. Not never giving up. But never needing to force forward. Because when discipline becomes who you are, quitting is no longer an option. And when restraint governs action, every move counts. That is why the samurai endured. And why those who understand this principle become unstoppable, without ever appearing in a hurry.